Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Backer Breaks It Down. In this episode, we continue with completing the square, this time when a does not equal 1. What do you think of this little joke? I just completed this. I think math guys will love it. Ha 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 ha. All right, so remember, completing the square is the process that we can use to write a standard form quadratic equation in vertex form. Now, previously, we looked at the process for when a was equal to 1. So, like, what do we do when it's not equal to 1? Well, honestly, it is just one additional step, and that's it. And it happens right at the very beginning, okay? When we're getting ready, that's when that one additional step occurs. Okay, so when we get ready to complete the square in a situation where there is a quadratic coefficient, we have to factor out the quadratic coefficient from the first 2 terms. Okay, so that's what I did here. So my first 2 terms are 3x squared plus 12x. I'm going to factor out the 3. And I'm going to write down what remains. So 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. And 12x divided by 3 is 4x. So that's that one additional step. Factor out the quadratic coefficient from the first 2 terms. Everything else is still the same. So I'm leaving a positive blank after my linear term, a negative blank after my constant term, and I'm setting up my square. That's what I did right here. Okay. So notice there's just a 3 in front of the x something squared. Okay. The 5 steps to complete the square are still the same. Half the middle, write it down, square it, multiply it by a, subtract and simplify. Okay, so this one would look like this. So I've already done the factoring, then I'm just going to go half the middle. So half of positive 4x is positive 2. Write it down, square it. 2 squared is 4. Multiply by a. 4 times 3 is 12. Subtract and simplify. 13 minus 12 is positive 1. And then here is my vertex form. So now I know that my vertex is the point -2, positive 1. Okay, so let's see the entire process from start to finish. Okay, so problem 2, I have the function f of x is equal to 2x squared minus 16x plus 27. Because I have a quadratic coefficient, I need to factor. But remember, I'm only going to factor it out from the first 2 terms. So I'm going to take out a 2, and I'm going to write down what's left over. And what's left over is x squared minus 8x. So that's that first step. Factor out the quadratic coefficient from the first 2 terms. Now I'm just going to organize this. So I have my positive blank, my constant term, my negative blank, and I'm going to set up my square. So I'm going to have 2, and then inside the parentheses, x something squared. And now I'm ready to go through those 5 simple steps to complete the square. Half the middle, write it down, square it, multiply it by a, subtract. So half the middle, half of -8 is -4. Write it down, square it, get 16, multiply by a, 16 times 2 is 32. And finally, subtract and simplify. So 27 minus 32 is -5. And here we have it, my quadratic function written in vertex form. And once it's in vertex form, it is super easy to identify the vertex. So my vertex is at the point 4, -5. Is it a maximum or a minimum? But because my a value is 2, I know it opens up, which means it's a minimum. Okay, I can use my vertex to find the range. So remember, range are your y values, low to high. So my function has a low y value of -5, and then it goes up forever to infinity and beyond. And then as far as my y-intercept goes, I can go right back to the original function. It's really easy to see what it is there. So my y-intercept is 27. Okay. And so that's how we would go about completing the square when there is an a term that isn't equal to 1. So we'll take a look at number 3 in class tomorrow. I just wanted you to get kind of see it in action here and then in action in class tomorrow. But here is how I break it down. So step 1, factor out the quadratic coefficient from the first 2 terms. Then get ready to complete the square where you have your positive blank after your constant term, your negative blank, well, after your constant term, and you want to set up your square. And then it's 5 simple steps. Half the middle, write it down, square it, multiply by a, subtract and simplify. And that's how Backer breaks it down.